Hey guys, we will get started in just about 1 minute. All right, well, welcome, folks, to session 2 of our talk here today from the NetVUE presentation over Women in Leadership at GU. I know many of you in the room, but I'm Colin Fields, and this is my 3rd year at Greenville. So I teach in the history department and direct the honors program, and I'm really excited to have had the chance to work alongside our faculty and especially our students in this process. So 2 of our students who are going to be presenting today are Stephanie Camp and Nick Christ, and so I'll briefly introduce them. They're both in our history education program. And so they both plan to be teachers, and Stephanie is a senior and Nick is a junior. So Stephanie will actually start student teaching next semester, and they do really impressive work in our program. I love our history and history education students. It's been a joy to work with them over the last couple of years. I was just telling them, Brian Hartley, when he hired me a few years ago, emailed me over the summer and asked if I wanted to be part of the team, and I hadn't even moved to Illinois yet, so I felt like I couldn't say no. So I said, sure, whatever else is coming my way, I will take it on, Brian. And it's been a very fruitful project. We didn't really have a plan in mind in terms of who we were going to study. As we started going through the archives, Ruby Dare's name popped out, and obviously I was familiar with the library being named in her honor. In the history program, we really live with books. Books are our profession. And so one of the things that I've appreciated is not only being able to dig into Ruby's life and her story, but really to get to sort of immerse ourselves in the space that she helped envision to live and be with books. Are we good, Luke? Sure. So I'll chat for a minute. We are really appreciative, Nick and Stephanie and myself, to Jane Hopkins, who's in attendance with us today. Jane was the librarian until 2016. Is that right, Jane? And Jane has been great giving us time and resources, and she actually took us around the current library just a few weeks ago because we were trying to figure out where things used to be. And so as she pointed out to us, the old entrance is no longer an entrance, but it's on the wall. I think there's sort of commemorations in the front now, but the library has gone under a lot of revisions and changes since Ruby Dare was here, and Jane helped oversee a lot of those. We also owe a debt of gratitude to Jane and Everett Sanders, who I don't believe are in attendance, but they are Greenville College class of 1950, and Jane Sanders was actually one of Ruby Dare's workers in the late 40s. So we were excited to have the opportunity to speak with them, and they gave us a lot of good information. In fact, one of the things that we hear about Ruby Dare, who was the college librarian until 1968, is that all business. That's what everyone says. Ruby Dare was about business, but not to the discredit of her students. In fact, that's what people tell us about her, is that students were her mission. And so the library was a conduit to her ministry, really, a lot of which involved the students and the faculty. And so Ruby Dare, we get the impression, cared intensely for Greenville College's students. And that's one of the things that we appreciate about her, is the way that she stewarded the resources that the college had. One of the things that I have tried to connect her story with is the story of the good steward in the Bible, because Ruby took over little and was blessed with much, and the college has grown, and the library grew, literally and metaphorically, throughout her time at Greenville. So I don't want to take up too much time because my students are going to get into her story, but I do have one quick funny note that Jane Sanders told me when I asked her. I said, what did Ruby Dare do for fun? I said, did she ever go to the movies? And Jane laughed. I said, what? She said, no. She said, nobody went to the movies. Of course, this would have been in the 40s and 50s. And she told me a funny story of some dean. I don't know if this is true or if this is an old wives' tale, but she said the dean would stand outside the movie theater because he wanted to know which Greenville College students were going into those dens of iniquity that were the movie theaters. And so I guess Ruby Dare did not go to the movies. And so she really, we get the impression, was all about business, and you'll get that in the presentation today. So we're blessed by Ruby's life and the lives that she touched. And one of the things that I try to convey to my students in the history department is that history is for us. We're the ones making sense of it. We're the ones doing something with it. These folks are gone, and we're trying to make sense of their stories and their motivations. And so I would encourage us in attendance today, and especially those of us who are working in the field, what are we doing with these stories? They're nice to hear, but I think really what I take away from this project is Ruby's, this idea of the virtue of seriousness, that she was serious about her work and the potential to touch lives here at Greenville. And I think that's a model for us, both in her role as a staff member, but also for what the library can do for students' lives. She writes at one point that the new library should be a place to live and be with books. And so I hope that our college, similarly, is a place of invitation for students to learn and be around one another and be blessed by lives of folks such as Ruby Dare. So Stephanie Camp, if you want to come on up, Stephanie's going to touch on Ruby's early life, and then Nick will come up and talk about the building of the new library, and then Stephanie is going to close us out later today with some comments on Ruby's missionary work toward the end of her life. So give Stephanie a round of applause if you don't mind.
Thank you so much, Professor Fields. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you all so much for being here. As someone that has been in the library sphere for most of her life, including 3 years as a circulation desk worker at Greenville University Library starting in 2021, I was really excited to be asked on for this project. Just to see the life that she lived and the impact that she has just been incredible. And since working on this project, seeing the impact that she's had on other people that I've been able to speak to has just been incredible. So as Professor Field says, I'm focusing mostly on her personal life, which was incredibly interesting. So to start off, she was born in December of 1904 to Mary and Albert Dare. She had 2 older sisters, Irma and Neva Dare, and she only lived in Illinois for a short time, and she wouldn't return until she came here to Greenville College many years later. She actually lived her formative years in New Mexico before it gained its statehood, which was really interesting. Her parents really pioneered out west. She had a quote saying that one lived in a shack until a barn could be built, and then octupled the barn until a house could be erected. So it was very pioneer living out west for her in her early life. She was actually a first or second grader whenever New Mexico gained its statehood in 1912. And then her family continued west, where she lived in California for a number of years. And then they returned back to the Midwest area, living in Missouri, where she completed high school. After high school, she got lots of higher education. She was incredibly intelligent. She was able to speak the classic languages, including Greek, which is incredibly interesting. But she ended up getting her Bachelor of Arts degree from Taylor University, which started as a women's school similar to Elmira University, which Greenville was before. And then she continued to get a Bachelor of Science and Library Science from the University of Illinois, and then a Master of Arts at the University of Michigan, and Master of Arts of Library Science at the University of Michigan. So she got a lot of education. She was a lifetime learner and continued to educate herself even while she was pursuing her career. Alrighty. So in 1929, as I'm sure you've heard over and over again from Dr. Hartley, she was asked on to be the classical language professor at Greenville College. But this didn't end up being the job that she kept. This was her passion. But President Long ended up inviting her to become the assistant librarian at the college. I sadly was not able to be present for the interview with Jane Hopkins, but I was able to read over the notes from that interview, and they marked her down as saying, "God made her a Greek and Latin professor, and President Long made her a librarian." And I just loved that quote. I thought that that just nailed it perfectly from what I had read. But even though this wasn't her passion per se to begin, she didn't have to do anything. So she was determined to excel in whatever position she was put in. So she worked very hard as the college's librarian, even attending more courses to learn about library studies throughout the summer. Alrighty, so this is just a few of the events. When we went through the archives, we were able to see a lot of different events that she worked on. She was very close with her library team, her student workers, and they did a lot of work to make the library the best that it could be. She was very meticulous, as you'll hear later in the presentation. But these celebrations became a testament to her dedication to the library. And she just wanted to instill this love for books and for education that she had. She wanted to instill it in the students at the college, and she did an amazing job doing so. Alrighty, so right now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Nick, who's going to talk a little bit more about the library itself.
Hello, everyone. So Miss Dare had an amazing impact on the library. She oversaw the library through its most formative years, and she really molded the library into what it is today. So she began working at Greenville as a professor of classic languages, like Stephanie said, in 1929. This was just months before the Great Depression started. So kind of a crazy time to be employed as a professor and then to become the librarian. So she started to get involved with the library slowly, and as she was here, she took on more and more responsibilities, and she became the head librarian by 1930. And her original salary was $185.95. So at this time, when she started, the library was just a single room in Hogue Hall. It was very small. There were books scattered all over the place. Dare described it as just a mess. By 1935, there were a total of 15,720 volumes in the library. So in 1939, at this time Hitler was invading Poland, Dare started to come up with ideas for a new library. The library had outgrown the room in Hogue Hall completely. Dare is actually quoted as saying that Greenville College needs a new library building could be doubted by no one who would make the most casual visit. So she really thought that we needed a new library. The library had also received a low grade by some accrediting agencies. At the time, the library was a measurement for the intellectual standing of the college because they didn't have computers back then. They didn't have all this information readily available at our fingertips like we do now with phones, internet, all of that. The library is where students would go to study, and that's where all the information was. So the library was so important, it's important now, but even more important than it is now. So the fact that it received a low grade from the accrediting agency meant that there was lots of work that needed to be done on the library. So Dare was very meticulous and had very in-depth plans for the library, including the color, location, design, furniture, and energy source of the library. She said 12 of the milder modern colors are used on the walls in such combinations as woodland rose and medium green, light and dark green, blue and gray, chartreuse and baton brown, lily yellow and medium brown, terracotta and light green. This had not been actually done yet. This was all planned out in her head, in her writings. That's how meticulous she was. they're worried about installing a furnace in the new library because of the size and the fire hazard. At first, she kind of thought like maybe they could have coal fuel for the library, but then she said to have coal delivered from the mines by truck and thus to make the coal cheap. That was her original plan, but eventually it was deemed kind of as maybe a fire hazard, and she was worried that coal dust could just get everywhere. But these were all ideas going on in her head just in the planning process. So here is the construction of the Memorial Library in 1950. And then eventually, the library was completed. It was completed in November 4th, 1950. The cost was $125,000. And it could house a total of 60,000 volumes. It was capable of seating up to 200 students. It had a typing room and an after-hours study room, as well as a music room. And it modernized and focused on functionality. So here is Memorial Library once it was completed. And this was the layout of the library. So on the first floor, and I want to say that this is still here today. These might not be used in the same way, these parts of the building. There's a couple areas that maybe been edited slightly, but we still use this first floor today. And she also built the second floor, which we still use, excluding the tower and a couple of minor adjustments. So on the first floor, there's the main reading and stack room, a browsing corner, an office, a workroom, a group study room, a periodical room, and a coat room. On the first floor. And then on the ground floor, okay, so this would have been the what we would consider the first floor now. The ground floor, there were classrooms, reading and stack room, receiving room, women's restroom, staff room, typing room, music listening room, heating unit, a kitchenette, faculty room, and men's restroom. And here are some pictures from the library at the time. The first picture there is the circulation desk. You'd often be able to find Miss Dare there at the circulation desk, ready to talk to students, or there could possibly be student workers working the circulation desk. There is a study and reading area on the top right, and part of the library with the bookshelves, but also lots of room for reading. And that's the thing, is this place was made with students in mind. It was supposed to be a place where students want to go, where they want to study. Students were in mind from the process at the very beginning to the completion of it. And then on the bottom right, there are a group of men, I assume, who are studying, possibly in one of the studying rooms. So the library had a tremendous impact. It had much more space than the old library, which again was one room in Hogue Hall. It could hold more than double of the volumes that the original library was able to hold, and it was built with expansion in mind. So as I said, this is a very student-friendly space, and most of the library is still used today. Miss Dare, she really had, as Professor Fields said, a heart and a passion for working with students. I think kind of a fun story about the development of the library, of the new library, is a story that Jane Sanders told us that, so obviously all of the books had to move from the old library in Hogue Hall to the new library that was built. And so Miss Dare kind of orchestrated this day where there were hordes of students that she gathered, students, faculty, professors, and they all moved the books by hand, just arms full of books to the new library. I think Ms. Sanders kind of described it as like a parade of students going down to the new library. So I think that's kind of fun to imagine. So this is, the library was eventually renamed after Ruby's death, the Ruby E. Dare Library, in honor of all of the work that she had done to expand the library and to make this beautiful building that we still use much of today. And now here's the library. And the Ruby Dare section, the section that she made, the tower's on the right, the section that she made and that she would have used was on the left, where it says the Ruby E. Dare Library. This is where we keep our books. We call it the second floor now. So on the second floor there are the books and there's study rooms there, and then in the basement where the archives and a lot of the books are, that's what Ruby left behind. All right, I'd like to invite Stephanie back up.
Alrighty, thank you, Nick. Alrighty, so Dare had more than just one vocation in her life. Another important part of her life was her missions work. So around the time, let's see, in 1961, she was approved for a sabbatical, and she decided to take a missions trip to Union Biblical Seminary, which is in current Pune, formerly known as Yavatmal, India. And Union Biblical is known for being one of the largest evangelical seminaries in all of India. So this was a pretty big deal. And she was sent over to sort of organize this new library that they were building there. And she was quite a professional when it came to organization, as you could see from Nick's portion. So they were very blessed to have her. So she ends up taking a 6-month journey to get over there, stopping in places like Ireland, Scotland, England, and the Holy Lands, which she was really excited about. And in some of her letters, you can read of her experiences that she had and how foreign everything was to her. And she had always been dedicated to missions and to different cultures. And she speaks of her new reality in some of her letters, saying that she's adjusting to sitting on the floor to eat curry and rice with her fingers, sleeping on train floors, learning how to put on a sari, using buffalo milk, eating goat meat, being gazed at because she was a foreigner in that country. And then my favorite, fearing cobras, rats, crows, cows, lizards, etc. She had a lot of run-ins with wildlife from the journaling that I read, which is super interesting. And just overcoming a lot of cultural differences, but she makes sure to speak on the dedication of these Christians over in India. And being Christian in a country where Christianity isn't the standard, and working with these students that are as dedicated as any that she's ever seen, it really inspired her. And it inspired her so much that upon her return, she wanted to return to India for 5 years this time instead of just a single year. She thought that this was really her calling to spend time in India with these people. Sadly, her visa was denied upon her return and she wasn't able to return. But this did not stop her from her travels and from helping others. She did a lot of library work in Canada, which I thought was really interesting after this. And she just kind of spoke on that God would call her to wherever she was supposed to be. And that place ended up being Greenville College, staying there for years after. So, just hitting on her life and legacy, I have this quote from her saying that the imperfections of our present age are a challenge for the future. She just had a real dedication, and she understood the transformative power that education has. And I think that that's something that we all can learn from and that has really impacted me during this project. Also on this slide, I have pictured her, and this is actually from a Christmas card, but it's Dare and her long-term friends and roommates that they actually built the house on Elm, which I'm sure some of you have seen. I saw it for myself recently. But no, they had a very close friendship, and it's been really beautiful to read about and learn about. So, sadly, Dare's life was cut short from a massive cerebral hemorrhage on August 8th of 1968. But her legacy continues. Her loss left a bit of a void at the college, but her legacy also leaves something to be learned from, a dedication to education, and just a spirit for service, I think, is something that she embodies so well. She cared so deeply for her students and made such a large impact on so many people. And we still feel it today with the upkeep of the library and the stories of people that she has touched. So it was really a delight to do this project, and I am hopeful that I will continue to learn more about her from all of you. And yeah, I just thank you all for being here. Me and Nick are gonna take some questions if you guys have any. Would you like to come up here, Nick? Thank you. Nice touch. Don't be shy. I know you have a question, Mr. Houston. I can feel it.
My question is about sources. You mentioned her journals.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little bit more about, for the library as well as for her life, what were the most important sources available that you consulted?
Yes, for me personally, focusing more on her personal life. It was different for Nick, but a large portion of the good information that I found about her thoughts and her personal life were actually from letters that she sent out to all of her close friends yearly that we're very grateful to have here. She was very intent on sending out these letters every year, and she would catch everybody up on all that was going on in her life. So that's where we see a lot of her speaking on her mission work and her plans for the future. So that was really exciting stuff to read.
Yeah, so for my portion, a lot of the information, it came from also letters, but different types of letters. Letters to the president back and forth on updates for the library, especially needs. They were constantly pushing for more and more for the library, for the students. And sometimes for whatever reason, whether that's literally the depression going on, the war, that's why the library kept getting pushed back. It was actually supposed to be built earlier, and it just kept getting pushed back. And so all of this information came from letters between Dare and the president, Dare and maybe board members. But also yearly reports were very helpful. Dare kept annual reports, but also monthly reports too sometimes. And so those were all very cut and dry factual information where me and Stephanie and Professor Fields kind of had to fill in some blanks there. And then the letters were the more fleshed out information, like directly from her. So any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. So for me, I really admire her dedication, especially to the students. And I also admire her servant-like attitude. I think it's a very Christian character trait to have, because, like we talked about, she didn't come here to be the librarian. She came here to teach the classics, and that's what she studied for. And so it would have been very easy for her, I think, to say, nope, I don't want to do that. Like, my passion is the classics, and so that's what I want to do. But Greenville needed a librarian, and they were facing issues with accreditation because of where the library was at the time. So I really admire her ability to adapt, and for the sake of the college, for the sake of the students, and just do what needs to be done. That is so admirable to me. And her character and her heart towards the students. Something that we learned is that she would often counsel students. Students would come to her office, and they would talk, and they would just pour out their hearts to Miss Dare. And I think that there was a culture of that at the time, but Miss Dare in particular, was an incredibly valuable resource for students and their emotional needs too. And I think that that's part of her legacy as well, is that that's still a thing on campus. Students here, we still feel like that we can go to our professors, go to faculty, and if we're having issues, that we can address those. And if there are issues that maybe aren't even academic, but just need an ear, that they are willing to listen and help. And it's, I just think that's part of her legacy. So Stephanie, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Sure. You took my answer. But I think that this really is just a story of incredible dedication and flexibility, honestly. And just to see that she believed so much in what this college's library could be. Because if you asked me to try to find funding for a library at the beginning of a war, I'm not sure that I'd probably tell you maybe next time. But she never gave up regardless, and I think that that's something really admirable about her. She was really dedicated, and she really believed in what could be, and she got her way, and we're very blessed for it. So, yeah, any more questions? Thank you.